The number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
Welcome to Cltv. I'm your host, Ken Lammers, and it's time again for my favorite five. We're going to start out today with Simple Justice, who has a post about, well, one of these law journal articles that your state law bar puts out every so often, and there's a gentleman there who's taken it upon himself to urge all defense attorneys to do their moral duty and to remind their client of his moral duty to be truthful to the court and be truthful to the prosecutor and truthful to everybody else, and therefore help him get over it all and not re-offend in the future and all that sort of stuff. And surprisingly, Simple Justice just isn't impressed by this. He doesn't think that's the way to go. I gotta say, it doesn't really strike me as the way we should be doing it in a adversarial system myself. But but maybe there are people out there thinking of switching to the inquisitorial system. The Inquisition, what a show. But I urge you to go over and look at that one. We're going to go on next to Underdog, and Underdog is talking about ethics too, and he's talking about well, he's going on about how it's unethical for a prosecutor to tell a witness not to give over evidence or not to tell the defense attorney something. I look at this, and the situations that he's talking about are situations, things, at least as I take from his article or from his post, are things where, say, for instance, police officer won't talk without the prosecutor being there, or the medical expert won't talk to the defense attorney without the prosecutor being there, and the prosecutor, looks at what the medical expert's saying, piece of paper the medical expert's got, and says, "Oh, you don't have to give him that." I think that is entirely. Now, let me say this to begin with. Let me say this: I believe in open files. I think they work better than closed files. I mean, there are exceptions. There are things such as if you got a tape which would clearly let the defendant know who the confidential informant is. Well, okay, then I can understand letting the defense attorney listen to it and not giving it right away so that the defendant can figure everything out. I mean, a lot of times the defendant can figure it out anyway, but there's really no need to help him along if he's of a mind to go out and make sure that the witness isn't available. But outside of that, in a lot of cases, I think open discovery, open files are wonderful. And I think in these situations where what John's talking about is when the expert says, "I'm not going to talk to you out in the hall without the prosecutor." He is in that point operating as part of the law enforcement mechanism, or however you want to say it, and the discovery rules apply to him just as they do to everybody else. Discovery rules and laws, and Virginia's are pretty tight. So I don't think that a prosecutor is wrong when he says to that expert, "No, you don't have to turn that over," because that's what the law says. You may disagree with it, but in any and all situations, what the law is trumps what the bar writes in the ethics books anyway, unless there's some sort of constitutional overturning of the law or something. But the law's there, and the prosecutor advising his witnesses about the law is not unethical. Now, if the prosecutor turns around to the expert witness and says, "Don't talk to the defense attorney," or turns around to the expert witness and says, "Don't talk about this to the defense attorney," or any kind of meddling like that, yeah, it's clearly wrong. But if the expert is asking, the prosecutor to be there, well, there's only one reason for the expert to ask the prosecutor to be there. That's in case so the prosecutor can advise him on what he is and isn't supposed to or allowed to keep from or give to the defense attorney. Like I said, while I may agree, while I may think that open files are a better way to go, you don't have to do that. It's not the law. And moving on, we get to of counsel, and of counsel is telling us more about the Nichols case. Again, for those of you who don't remember when I brought it up the last time I pointed y'all at of counsel, Nichols case is the guy who overpowered the female deputy, killed the judge. I think he killed one other person, maybe the clerk of the court, clerk in the courtroom, and got away out of the courthouse and held somebody hostage for several hours until he got talked out of it all. The judge is now being called upon to answer questions by the legislature in Georgia as to what the heck's going on, and of counsel goes over some of his replies and what he's talked about there. In case you all don't remember, what the judge is doing is he just refused to go forward with the case, continued it indefinitely until more funding shows up for the defense attorneys, who apparently have spent somewhere between $1,200,000 to $2 million, depending on what figures you believe and all that. So I'll let of counsel carry on further. Actually, he's giving more. Of counsel is giving more follow-ups on this that I'm actually pointing you to. I would suggest that anybody who's interested in this case keep going back, because of counsel's keeping pretty good track of it. So then we get to a public defender, and a public defender is going over Virginia against Moore, and I haven't really blogged too much about Virginia against Moore recently. I blogged about it as it came through. I and some other people that were on this blog, on Criminal Law Blog, blogged about Virginia against Moore, or at the time it was Moore against Commonwealth and Commonwealth against Moore, depending on which court it was in. Blogged about it, and I mean, the basic difference being, can a police officer in Virginia make an illegal arrest, clearly an illegal arrest, and not violate the Fourth Amendment? It's going to be interesting to see how this turns out. I've read different blogs, and some of them say that if you were there, it felt like it was a slam dunk for Virginia. But if you read the transcripts, I'm not so sure. And one of the reasons I'm not so sure is exactly the point that a public defender is talking about. He quotes Scalia at length, where Scalia basically just walks the government attorney up to the cliff, and then gets him to take like 2 steps further. And it's a really interesting read, and I suggest you go check it out. Finally, there's sentencing law and policy. Sentencing law and policy this week had a section on, or a post on the Second Amendment, and we all know the case that's going up, in front of the Supreme Court about whether or not they can, well, basically the question is going to be whether or not guns are an individual right to possess. And he raises an interesting question. People everywhere else means all of the people. So, all of the rights that are referred to by people, it's whether or not you've been convicted of a felony or not. And in the Second Amendment, it refers to people. And he points out that the government's trying to say, well, in this case, people doesn't mean people. It means people. So, it's the government trying to make a case that if it's an individual right, well, we can still deny it to people, to certain people. Which will make an interesting argument someday in the future, assuming that D.C. loses. But let's see where that goes. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this week's Fab 5. I will be posting something up next week. Can't guarantee anything at the beginning of the week because we're beginning a 4-day weekend. Actually, as I am filming this, I'm on the first day of my 5-day weekend because while here in Kentucky we haven't gotten any snow, or at least not in my holler, over across the border in Virginia, They were apparently slammed. I was in the truck on the way when my boss and one of the secretaries both sent me messages saying, you know, don't bother, judges closed the courthouse, go home. Which I'm very happy about, because I really don't want to go over that mountain that's right at the border if I don't have to, if the weather's bad. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this week. I wish you a good week, and I'll see you sometime soon.